You've got a great idea for a small business, but you just can't get it off the ground. You want to be your own boss, set your own hours. Well, new year means new opportunities, and Shopify's got you covered to help get your venture off the ground. Shopify makes it easy to manage your growing business. You can get your store up and running easily with thousands of customizable templates. And they help with the details like shipping, taxes, and payments from one single dashboard. Don't kick yourself next holiday season when your 2025 resolution list looks the same as it does today. Make it happen with Shopify. Established in 2025 has a nice ring to it, doesn't it? Sign up for your $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/income, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/income to start selling with Shopify today. Shopify.com/income.
Hi everyone, I'm Deb Flashenberg. Welcome to Yoga, Birth, Babies, a podcast produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. We will be diving into everything prenatal yoga, birth, and baby related, hoping to inspire, educate, and empower you through your journey into motherhood. Thank you for listening.
Hi, I'm Deb Flashenberg, and I'm your host of Yoga Birth Babies. And today we're going to talk about the book, Happy to Help, Adventures of a People Pleaser. And I'm really excited to have the author and Prenatal Yoga Center alum, Amy Wilson, here to talk about it. But let me tell you a little bit about the book. So Happy to Help is a collection of essays about how you can be the one everyone else depends on, but you're still struggling, and how you can be, in quotes, happy to help, even when, for your own sake, you probably shouldn't be. It's a hilarious group of essays I think you're going to get a lot out of. And what I love about it is Amy opens up and she's really vulnerable and really personal in some parts, but also really funny in other parts. And she talks about her own struggle with perfectionism, and she calls herself a recovering perfectionism. And there's even data on multitasking. Now, you guys know, if you listen to the podcast, I love data. And before I got into this and read this book, I was convinced there really was a difference because I was brought up in the 90s and early 2000s where there was all these ideas about how men and women's brains were so different. And I was convinced because I'm the multitasker in my family and my husband is not. And it turns out, I know you guys are going to have to listen to the conversation. Are there really differences in our abilities to multitask, or is it something conditioned? So I'm excited for you to hear about that and just so many more things. Let me tell you a little bit about Amy. Besides being a Prenatal Yoga Center alum with all three kids, she is the author of the memoir, When Did I Get Like This? And of course, her latest book, Happy to Help. Since 2016, she has been the co-host of the Webby-honored podcast, What Fresh Hell? Laughing in the Face of Motherhood. Amy is also an actor who appeared on Broadway and as a TV series regular in many TV sitcoms. She lives with her family in New York City. And it was really delightful to get to connect with Amy after all these years. Her first child is 22 years old, so she was part of the original PYC crew, and it was fun to chat with her. Before we get to my conversation with Amy, I always love to give a bit of an update about what's happening at Prenatal Yoga Center. Really, the best way, I say, to understand not just our classes, our workshops, our teacher training, is check out our website, prenatalyogacenter.com. There you can find our schedule for all our in-studio, online classes. We have a whole bunch of on-demand workshops for new and expectant parents, and just as many in-studio. And I love to really focus on those on-demand classes because I know not everyone can get to New York and not everyone's on our schedule. And yet it's still really important to have that support and community. So you can still be part of the PYC community, even taking our on-demand or even our re-release classes. So check all that out on our website. One other thing I want to bring up is I've been so appreciative of those that have reached out with ideas for the podcast. We have over 400 episodes. So I love when you reach out saying, oh, I'd love for you to do a podcast on siblings, or have you thought of doing a podcast on mastitis? You give me some amazing ideas, even some to revisit with different guests from a different point of view. So keep that coming. And if you think you'd be a great guest or you want to share your birth story, check it on our website. There's an application to come onto the podcast. And I really do go through those and find some wonderful guests. So make sure if you think that resonates with you, you're like, oh, I have something to say, let me know. Let's see if we're a good fit with each other. And then last thing is, as always, I just want to thank you for being part of our listening community. It means a lot that you're spending your time with me and my guests and hearing what we have to say. All right, I think that's it. We're going to take a super quick break. When we come back, please enjoy my conversation with Amy Wilson.
Llévate más de lo que esperas todos los días con el nuevo McValue en McDonald's. Ahora puedes comprar uno y sumarle otro por $1. Así que cuando tu equipo favorito enfrente a sus rivales, enfrenta tus antojos con $5 Meal Deals. Y si estás corriendo para alcanzar el desayuno, corre al app para llevarte ofertas antes del cutoff. Tú decides, y con McValue, tu decisión siempre rinde más. Precios y participación pueden variar. BOGO $1 válido para un producto de igual o menor valor. Debe estar registrado en Rewards para ofertas en el app.
Hi, Amy. How are you?
Good, Deb. Can you believe it? Can you believe this all these years later?
I'm trying to figure out, how old is your first child?
He's 22.
Oh my gosh. So you must have started coming right when we opened.
Right when I think I was a founding attendee. Yes.
Oh
the prenatal yoga center. Yes, I was. And yeah, he's 22. I was just with him for his 22nd birthday in North Carolina.
That is crazy. And you have 3 kids all together, right?
Yes, 22, 20, and 17 now.
All right. Wow. So you're about to get another out of the house. You're almost an empty nester.
Gosh, I know. And I'm still doing yoga. Yeah, but I'm almost an empty nester.
Oh my gosh. I love hearing that. Yeah, I love that. I've kind of seen you around on like Facebook and stuff. And when I saw you had this new book out, I thought, oh, I want to talk to Amy again because I really love it. And as I mentioned to you before we started recording, I've been listening to your podcast, which I needed a break from like politics and the news.
Yes.
And this was perfect. So
yes, it's interesting you say that because we think that, we think to ourselves that is, you are definitely choosing to change the channel and it's like watching Family Feud or something like that. You were doing something else for a little while.
And it's enjoyable. It's often something I listen to either while I'm cooking or I'm walking to the train or something. So it's fun. I've been hearing your voice in my head for a little bit, even though I haven't seen you in a couple decades.
Wow. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. So I know a little bit about you, but why don't you share a little bit about yourself?
So I am a comedian and actor first when I got out of college and did sketch comedy and improv comedy and did some sitcoms. I was on Broadway too. And then I had 2 kids in 2 years and things sort of changed quickly in terms of me not being able to work as much. And wrote a show for myself to have something to perform because I missed performing, and it was called Motherload. And I actually ended up doing it in New York while I was pregnant with my 3rd, pretty visibly. So it was the rare acting job that you can do pregnant. You can do TV, you can't do theater if they can see that you're pregnant. But I did that show, and then I toured around the country with it for a while. And out of that came a book deal for my first book, which was called When Did I Get Like This? And it was a funny parenting book that came out in 2010. And after that, more kids stuff, more life stuff. And then I started my podcast in 2016, my parenting podcast, and I've been doing that ever since. And the opportunity to write Happy to Help, I've been writing other books along the way, books that mostly didn't work or didn't sell for different reasons. And Happy to Help, kind of the opportunity fell into my lap because I ran into Zibby Owens, who's the CEO of Zibby Books, and she had read When Did I Get Like This? And she said, I read that when my twins were little. I loved that book. You should write a second book. And I said, well, tell me about it. And then it actually happened. And I got the chance to write a book for Zibby Books, and now it's coming out.
I'm really excited for you. So one thing I noticed a lot in your work and your writing and your podcast and your One Woman show, a lot of it has to do with motherhood, which you've been in the thick of for 22 years.
Right.
So will you talk a little bit about how motherhood, I guess this is a really crazy question, how it's changed your life, but really how it's at the heart of so much of your work?
It's a really good question. I mean, I think it was like write what you know. And so, and when I wrote Motherload, it was what was in front of me. And then,
Literally.
yeah, exactly. Like, this is what I'm doing every day. And then like the more I worked on that show, it was so gratifying to see the women coming to the show, and I would do it around the country and just laugh so much and just be so thrilled to be out of the house, first of all, to be creating something that groups of women were coming to together, and they would be like elbowing each other during the show, like, that's you would so do that, you would so do that. And just really feeling like I was serving mothers by giving them this opportunity to both laugh at themselves and also be taken seriously, because the point of motherload was sort of, that this weight of society that you have to be perfect all the time. I mean, it's not your imagination that it's there. It's all around us, and breaking free from it is the goal, but it's not in your head that people are, holding you to a ridiculous standard. And then podcast, same thing. We started the podcast, and we did at first say like, well, maybe we should talk about other things, because we've both done parenting for a while, try something else. And then my co-host, Margaret Abels, and I kind of quickly realized, but parenting, like, this is the audiences that we've each built. It's probably a better place to start a podcast from our place of strength and experience. And then when it came time to write Happy to Help, I wanted it to be for women, not just for parents. I mean, it's really for everybody. I'd like to think it's for everybody, but women tend to buy books and women tend to buy theater tickets. And so I've never shied away from creating content that's specifically for women, that makes them laugh and think and feel better about themselves. That's always been something that's really, really motivated me. So I guess that's why I'm still happy to be doing it 20 years later.
No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're totally right. Like, do what you know, do what's in front of you and what resonates with you and what excites you to speak about. And although I'm sure there's times at parenthood you're like, oh my gosh, I'm so over it. But it's still, even that is something to talk about. And like, well,
that's true.
What do you want to share?
Right. That's true. I mean, there's definitely episodes of What Fresh How recently, as our kids get older, like, well, let's just start talking about things that are interesting to us, that are maybe parenting adjacent, but they're just all of us out here trying to live better, more intentional lives, and know what to worry about and what not to worry about, and what to let go and what to double down on. That'll always be interesting to me. And so, I feel privileged to write about it. And I think I have something I want to say.
Yeah.
I want to tell women that when things are hard, they're hard because they're hard, not because there's something wrong with you. And I think it's a message that women really need to hear.
Yeah, I totally agree. So let's turn a little bit towards your new book, Happy to Help. So these essays explore the way that women are conditioned to be helpers. I feel like I totally relate to that. What do you, especially in our society, when do you think we first started to receive those messages? Because I'm trying to be cognizant about that with my 10-year-old, that she doesn't always have to be the helper and my son can just kind of, help a little bit more.
Right. There are studies that came out recently about the gender gap in free time, and that women of all ages do more household work. That includes 18-year-olds, that includes women who aren't married or partnered. It includes women who aren't parents. Like, just being a woman, and 18 was as young as they tested. 10-year-olds might have gotten the same thing. Means you're doing more of the cleaning, the caretaking, the noticing, the arranging, that it's just work that falls to us. And I think with our best intentions, because I have two sons and a daughter, that my daughter does do more. She does more cooking. She does more participation in dinner time planning and cooking and cleanup, especially now that she's the only one at home. We really enjoy it. And I'm thrilled that she's doing it. I'm thrilled that she enjoys doing it. But then there is part of me that's like, but does she really? But am I telling her to do it? I think it's important to be aware of it. And we're swimming in it. So it's hard to avoid all of it. But I think it's important to be aware of as a first step.
That makes a lot of sense. And yeah, it's something to think about is, are we just putting that on them, or are they really enjoying it? I have to actually start to think about that.
Or ourselves, certainly ourselves. And I was just talking to somebody about, like, when you've done that thing 500 times, it is easier to just do it the 501st time than to tell your teenager, 4 times to do the thing and end up with them mad at you and not doing the thing, right? That's all harder than just keeping with the way things have always been. But
Yeah,
that
I
doesn't
think
mean
I'm
it's what you
guilty of
should do.
that. I'm like,
Yeah,
oh, I'm
me
just going to
too.
do it myself. And then I get resentful that I'm the one
Right.
doing it.
Right.
So one thing I love about your book, because I'm a geek for data, is that you talk about some of the research. So can you share some of the research that you've done around multitasking? I actually think I'm an excellent multitasker, and I'm pretty sure my husband falls flat on that. So
Right.
let's talk about the data.
Me too. Right. So I was very interested and I really didn't know going into this book. I wanted to write about multitasking because I thought, well, it is a kind of a trap that we fall into that we have to do everything, but we are better at it, right? Isn't that settled science that women's brains are just better at multitasking than men's and because our brains work differently, which maybe some people listening are like, no, that's not true. But if you grew up in the 90s and 2000s, that was very much in the social science conversation. There were many best-selling books and talk shows talking about how men were from Mars and women were from
That's
Venus.
exactly what I was just thinking. Yes,
right?
that book.
We
Yeah.
were just so different. There were Broadway shows about it. We are just completely different. And these are locked in and you can laugh about it, but it's true. It's science. And turns out when you really scratch the surface on these things, there is tons of bias. There was tons of overdrawn conclusions and blind spots that mean that it wasn't really true. But there was one very funny study that I talk about in the book in multitasking where they wanted to test men versus women. And so they came up with what they would do is they would take these people to a field, men and women, and they'd say, there's somewhere here in this field is a lost key that you have to find. And they'd look for the lost key. And then the multitasking part was their cell phone would ring while they were looking, and somebody on the other line would be asking them trivia questions that they had to answer while they were looking for the key. Don't ask me why this is the multitasking test. But turned out on this test that both men and women both did like okay, not great on the trivia questions because they're both distracted by this timed search that they're doing for the key. But the way they looked for the key, most women in the study would go like a lawnmower, right? Like they'd pick one corner and then they just would methodically work their way back and forth across the field or do some other method like that to make sure that they were covering each part of the field. And more often than not, the men in the study would wander to the middle of the field and just start like looking and shrugging, like John Travolta in that Quentin Tarantino movie, right? Like, I don't see any key. And women were much, much better at finding the key. And the results of that study were sort of like, see, women really are better at multitasking, when really, I think mostly what that study showed is that women are better at finding things other people have lost.
I was going to say organizing.
Right.
That's where my brain went to, is that, and that kind of goes back to what you said about the helper situation. So in my family, I am the organizer of everything, which
all the things.
Yeah, all the things. And I'm just very organized. My calendar, although not my closet, but like pretty much I know where things are. I can do it. And I don't know if that's because it's by default, because that's not the key of everybody else, or I do it and they don't because they know I'm going to do it. So It could just be that it's a role, it's just a strength for women because that's what perhaps they've grown up with, or it's been imparted on them, or it's because the other people in the family they're like, oh, you're going to do it better. And I was starting to think about what you said about the key. And I'm like, what would I do? And it's interesting. I think I go somewhere between the two. I would go into the middle of the field and almost do like an outer spiral. Like I'm going to start in the middle and then spiral out. So you get, does that make sense? Can you visualize?
It does.
Yeah. And I'm like, oh, I'm kind of somewhere in that middle. But I think while doing it, it would be slightly distracting listening to trivia questions at the same time. I'm like, how many times have I been doing stuff around the house on the phone, talking to somebody, or kind of listening when someone is telling me a story, or like my husband's talking to me about something, or my kids are explaining something. So again, I think it's more, is it something we're innately born with as, someone in the female sex, or is it because we've built that that habit. We've built that strength.
I mean,
don't know.
I think the latter. I mean, I don't think that all women are equally good at doing 10 things at once. And turns out, I mean, the point I try to make in the essay is that we're not any better at doing more than one thing at a time.
We're just
as
conditioned.
distracted. We're just conditioned to be working under those constrained conditions more often. That's right. I do think some people are better, and it's men and women are just better at organizing, getting things done. I like to get a lot of things done. I like to be highly productive. I find satisfaction in that. I love a checklist. And I am the kind of person who, like, when I go to get my hair colored, if I have a half an hour in the chair, I'm not just going to look at my phone or like talk to somebody. I'm going to go with my thank you notes to write, or I'm going to go with that. I'm going to edit this essay. I always know what I'm going to do with a block of free time, no matter where it is. And I do think it makes me more highly productive. And I do think it's not always fair to demand anything near that level of productivity and focus from the people around you, right? Because we're just wired differently. Mm-hmm. But I think to women, it's sort of uniquely, we are given, in addition, like, we make things harder than they need to be. Our standards are annoyingly high. We don't let people help us. All that stuff gets handed back to us when we say, can somebody give me a hand for a change? Well, you wouldn't let me help you. I'm not so sure that's true.
Well, that kind of leads me to my perfectionist question. That was a good segue. So you used to call yourself a perfectionist and then a recovering perfectionist, but you seem to have come to reject those definitions of yourself. So let's talk more about that.
You know, as I was doing research on perfectionism for the book and people pleasing, because it is sort of shorthand for this kind of thing, but it's actually very different when you look into what's people pleasing, right? A highly productive person is not a people pleaser unless it's a woman, then she's a people pleaser. A highly productive man is just a highly productive man. And also perfectionism is not usually a term that is either applied to men or that men apply to themselves. There are studies that show that women are much more likely to say, oh yes, I'm a perfectionist. I have perfectionist tendencies. I have people-pleasing tendencies than men are. And I'm not sure that it's because they are more likely to be prone to these frailties. I think it's because when women struggle with having too much, with feeling overwhelmed, we're told that we have these personality flaws instead of we need to simplify our calendar. We're told that we people please. That's our real problem. And we need to fix that first. And then all these things that we have to do will slot neatly into the time available if we just stop having annoyingly high standards. And as somebody who takes every assignment seriously and has read all the books about perfectionism and people pleasing and be like, well, I'm not sure I really identify with this, but it must be me, and it must be this fault I have to fix in myself so that I can find time to write this book. I found it was just more stuff clogging the filter, really. It just was getting in the way of me getting the change that I was really seeking, which was much more practical and less about beating myself up.
So what was the change you were seeking?
The change I was seeking was finding more peacefulness with my sort of what I do is enough. You know, that if I answer 10 emails today and I didn't get to the other 4 that people are really waiting on from me, I'm still a good person, and that's that kind of thing. That inner peacefulness comes from within, or that inner peacefulness comes from, we're going to have to order in every night this week unless you want to make dinner because I'm in a really crunch season at work and I really have to put my head down. And that's something that you can ask for and not feel guilty about and just take up the space that you need. That is a better way to get more done than to wonder why you like to have so much to do all the time. So, do we ever bring this on ourselves? Yes. But a lot of the overwhelm in the situations I've had in my life where I'm really cracking were not, the Christmas tree doesn't look the way I want it to, right? They were like, my mom is sick and so is my kid at the same time and I can't be in 2 places at once. They were practical and situational. It wasn't me, overthinking things.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Do you feel like you have found peace with not getting everything done?
Yeah. That Oliver Berkman book, 4,000 Weeks. Have you read that? I'm reading his new one now called Meditations for Mortals. It's about productivity, and it's very interesting because he comes from this idea that there are more things to do than you have time to do them. And the way out of that is not to work harder or get up earlier, because he's a man. So he's not saying stop being a perfectionist, stop people pleasing. His advice doesn't include those things because he's writing from a male point of view. It isn't to work harder and harder. It is instead to accept your finitude, he calls it, that you only have 4,000 weeks on this earth. And do you really want to spend them doing the things that you're doing? You need to pick fewer things and do them. And his writing has really helped me. And then also, honestly, what was missing from it? This that there was none of this, you need to change how codependent you are. Like that is missing from his writing. And I'm not sure that was something he intentionally removed. I don't think it was something that he had internalized as flaws in himself in the first place.
Well, you brought up productivity. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned you like to be productive. I'm absolutely that same person. Like if I'm going to get my toes done, I bring my computer.
Yeah.
I like being productive.
I know. Me too.
Pepsid Complete knows that food is one of the best parts of game day. That is, until heartburn strikes. Thankfully, just one chewable tablet of Pepsid Complete provides dual-action heartburn relief with an antacid that starts working instantly and an acid reducer that lasts all day. So you can stay focused on that second helping of chili without worrying about heartburn. All day based on 8-hour symptom relief studies during the day. Use product only as directed.
I'm looking for my perfect pair of Abercrombie denim. There's nothing better than the perfect jean and going out top combo, or an outfit that perfectly matches your plans. Abercrombie's relaxed jean goes with every occasion, date nights or going out with friends. Right now, get 25% off almost everything at Abercrombie to plan your Valentine's outfit. Offer valid in stores and online January 23rd, 2025 to January 28th, 2025 in the U.S. and Canada. Exclusions apply as indicated. Online price reflects discount.
What do you think about the advice about productivity? Do you think it's falling short for people with too much to do? Because I feel like people are like, oh, just take more breaks or just make sure you're doing something for yourself. And I like that. And I try, but then I get, and this could just be me, but then I'm like, great advice, but where am I going to fit that in? Like even going to I need to go to the physical therapist. My back is killing me. And I'm like, where am I going to stick that in? The advice just to take a pause, that feels even overwhelming because the list feels so big. So I'm sure there's better productivity advice, or what are your thoughts on productivity advice?
I mean, I've done all the things. I talk about this in the book. Like I have all the planners. I've done all the systems, accountability things, something that actually really works for me. This is getting kind of specific. There's something called Cave Day. Have you heard of Cave Day?
No.
It's basically like group accountability over Zoom. It's all just nice people, and somebody in Ontario is doing your taxes, and somebody in Arizona is doing a spreadsheet, and you're like, hey, I'm Amy. I'm working on the edits for an essay for my book. You can say hi to the people, but you don't have to if you don't want to. And then you're just on the screen together, mute for 45 minutes. And when you feel like getting up and doing something else, you just look back at these other people humbly trying to do one thing for 45 minutes and you go back in. And I have found that at times very useful. And then other times it's like, I haven't done that now in the last couple of months. I try everything, and a lot of it does work. And I think that throwing the baby out with the bathwater isn't the right answer. Like there are ways to get more done. You will get more done if you bring your laptop to get your pedicure. You will, and you might need to because you're in a busy season. But when you're that kind of person, like the world just makes more, right? And so that's the real problem. That I'm always in a busy season. I always have to take my laptop with me because there's always a looming deadline, and that's something you need to look at because it's not something you can outrun with the best planner or notebook, or you can't get up early enough to do all the things. And just making peace with that has brought me a lot of peace. But then I don't want to say and so productivity is stupid and who cares, because I think that's also not true. I'm sort of the Lorax that speaks for the capable people, right? Like some of us do get a lot done, and it's because we're thoughtful about it and we can be depended upon and we're extremely capable. And I don't want to hear that I'm a bad person, or that there's something wrong with me when I say that, can somebody else take a turn? I want to hear, oh, sure, I can do that. But when the people around us are used to us doing all of our stuff and half of theirs, changing that is not easy.
But I do like how you talked about yourself being a capable person and owning that, because I don't want to sound like a jerk, but I feel like I am too.
Mm-hmm. You were, because you have the business. And that, I think that's what it was, like a people pleaser and perfectionist. Like that stuff rankled me because I'd read it and it's like, oh, it's just that sad person who thought of everybody but herself. And, she never saw the ocean because she just put other people first. Like, that's not me. I have a book and a business, and you have a business, and we're good parents, and we're good people, and we're good friends.
But
we actually get a lot done. Right.
Yeah.
We're capable. Right. And so saying that there's something wrong with you or you're insufficient, of course, I'm going to react to that and be like, well, that can't be it because I'm very capable. I think that's why I resist those things. But you can't forever fix everything for everybody around you, and being and accepting your limitations emotionally and practically is the only way. People aren't going to stop asking us to do more than our share. I guess.
Absolutely. And I think, and I agree with that. And I'm glad that you're kind of bringing that to light, because I had a friend, she's like, how do you get so much done? And I'm like, I don't know. I'm just very capable. And then I sometimes again get to like, why am I always having to get so much done? So that's also kind of like the asking for help, and it's a lot to carry to be able to get so much done. At least that's how I feel in my life and body, that it's sometimes it feels like a burden. I don't know if you sense that.
Sometimes it feels like a burden, and if resentment creeps in, then I think it really might be people pleasing at work, right? If you aren't getting to your own things and you're really resenting this other person, then you are putting somebody else's wants and needs above your own. But if you're a mom, isn't that parenthood, putting other people's wants and needs above your? Wasn't that the assignment? And when I look back on my life, yes, do I get resentful that I'm the only one who puts the groceries away? Yes. Am I resentful that my kid is sick and I have to cancel another meeting to take her to the doctor? No, I'm not resentful. Right. Of course it's falling to me, and I'm going to do it. But I'm starting to think, I don't know if I can handle everything. That's different than resentment to me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. Okay, I want to talk about some of your essays. So some of them are really funny, but then some of them also get really personal and vulnerable in places. What was your intention when you set out to write this book? Were you thinking about offering a little bit of both, or is that just how it unfolded as you wrote it?
I think it was the latter. I think it sort of unfolded as I wrote it, that I started with this idea of there are times that I've over-delivered in my life, and there are many, and sometimes it was a happy ending, and I'm really glad I stuck it out, or I never would have, I'm making this up, met the guy, whatever, gotten the part, whatever. And there were definitely times when I over-delivered in situations that were never going to work out, no matter how hard I worked, and why didn't I see it sooner? And that was the container. And I wanted over time for the character in the book to sort of learn lessons, which are not chronological, by the way, that she learns something that she takes into her next adventure. And some of the lessons I felt like really needed to be in there that weren't just, laugh-a-lot stories about my crazy life, that there were times when engaging with the limits of your ability to help somebody or to help yourself, or to get certainty in a situation that is completely uncertain, like the pandemic, needed to be in there. And I tried to make that made the running order of the essays very important. And I also tried to do, Mary Carr, who's a memoirist and a writing teacher, talks about humor will help your reader over the dark places. So if you have dark places, make sure there's humor. And so I really did try, even in an essay that was about a kid in the hospital or whatever, that there was some lightness and humor in every page, and an overall sense of we're going to be okay. When you're watching a movie and the lead of the movie is in peril and it's minute 35 and it's Tom Cruise is going to get away.
It's a 2-hour movie. He's going to be okay.
2-hour movie. He's the lead, and we're going to be okay. I'm a little worried, but I'm not that worried. I wanted that to be true in the book, even in the sad places, that this person is going to overcome. But in order for the book to be worth reading, I wanted it to be I've been there too. We are all stuck sometimes with something that feels completely unfixable, and yet which the world thinks is our responsibility to fix and get back to them when it's done.
I really love, though, that you did open up with the vulnerability. On the other side, now that it's out there, are there any moments that you're like, wow, that was really open and vulnerable? And it's like when I either do a podcast or I'm teaching, I kind of put everything out there. And then afterwards, sometimes I'm like, oh, that was a lot. Not that I feel like I'm dumping on people, but I'm opening up, which is probably why I never listen back to my own podcast or even watch because I record a lot of my classes, go back. It's almost like, kind of not this personal, but like reading a journal. Do you ever have there been any of the stories that you were happy you put out there, but at the same time you don't know if you want to revisit them, or it's kind of strange, like people are really seeing an inside of me?
Well, it'll be interesting to see, what reader response is to that. The part that is more challenging when you're writing memoir or essays that are based on real life is that it's including other people. And the people in this book who are named by name or who are identifiable by who they are. My college roommate senior year, I don't ever say her name, but she'll be like, oh, that's me. And they're in the story. They're either, if they're identifiable and I say something about them or I include a conversation that we had, I got permission to include that conversation. And because Melissa Febo said something about like, you're writing a memoir about yourself will heal yourself. It won't heal the other people you're writing about, and they're entitled to have whatever feelings they want, and you have to let them know about it ahead of time. It doesn't necessarily mean you change things, but you give them the opportunity. And so I give people the opportunity to look at it and to veto things or say, please don't say that. And in most cases, the changes that I was asked to make were very small. And in one case, it was even, you left out this part. Like, you left out this even more vulnerable part, and you should talk about this too. And so it is a real act of generosity for the people you love to sort of allow their lives to be, or your interactions with them. It's not their lives, it's your life, but they're in it and they're part of it. And I think that might be harder for them because they didn't write the book, but there's this thing out there. And that's a real act of generosity. And I tried to be as truthful and as clear as I could. And in all situations that were maybe a little sticky that were in the book, to show that I am the one who's either over showing up, or I'm misunderstanding, or I'm letting somebody walk all over me. If I'm letting somebody walk all over me, it's because I'm the dumb that lets people walk all over me, not, can you believe this person was mean to me?
Right.
And tried to be really careful about all of that. And I hope I have. But you're right. It is bare. It is bearing yourself.
So do you feel like people are going to walk away from this and feel like, okay, now I know how to ask for help, or now I can prioritize differently? Because your journey of writing this, I'm wondering, do you feel like you are different on the other side? Because I'm guessing if you feel like you're different, readers are going to feel like they may find a difference.
Yes. The process of writing this book completely changed me and my closest relationships. Because I really did look at myself, like, where am I lacking? That's not really the right term, but more like, what have I been missing? What did I not understand at these points? And really trying to get clear about that for the essay, of course, taught me like, oh, here's what I wasn't getting when I was signing up for every committee, is that if you want to have female friends when your kids go off to college, you have to reach out to them. You don't just show up for the bake sale. You have to call them up and see how they're doing, which you can forget to do if you're the kind of person who always has a to-do list as long as her arm. And of course, realizing that as I was writing it made it something that I not only wanted to put into the book, but that I also wanted to change in my own life. So it was a great thing for me to have written this book for myself, for the things that I learned.
And then I'm guessing people from reading it are going to be like, I can take those steps too. I can self-reflect
Yeah,
on
I
myself.
hope so. Right. I mean, it's not, it's definitely not
It's not a how-to.
It's not a how-to. It's probably a how not to. Right. It's not like.
But I actually think there's value in that. Seeing somebody's journey, reflecting, going into someone's journey, where you're thinking about yourself. I think someone else steps away, say, do I do that? I think maybe I do that too. And then
Right.
it's relatable.
Right. I think so. Like when I used to do Motherload, people would always come up to me after the show, mothers, and they'd want to tell me their stories, their birth story or their crazy colicky baby story or their preschool application story or all the different things that were in the book. That were in the play. They'd come up to me and they'd want to tell me their stories. And I always loved that. That was always the best part of being on tour, was talking to these people and seeing that I'd lit something up, that they were making a connection in their own lives. And so I do really want that for this book, that somebody's going to enjoy reading it. I tried to write something very enjoyable, but also like, that's interesting. Gosh, I never really thought of it like that, and start to make their own connections. That's sort of my fondest wish when I imagine somebody reading this book.
I think that's wonderful. Okay, we're going to take another break. When we come back, what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents? Think way back when you're
way back.
All right, we'll be right back.
You've made it through the first couple of years with your kiddo, and life is crazy. You need Parent Savers. Each week, we provide moms with the practical information they need to help preserve their sanity. With the help of our experts, parents of toddlers get the superhero strength they need to tackle the world and the next sturdy diaper. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Parent Savers podcast." Parent Savers, empowering new parents.
Okay, we're back. So I'm really curious because you've been a parent for a couple decades, but you also are very much still in the parenting world. So
Yeah.
I'm kind of curious what's going to come up. So what is one final tip or piece of advice you'd like to offer new and expectant parents?
I think that there is this tendency in social media and sort of the hallmarkification of everything, is that every moment of your pregnancy is so precious, and certainly every moment with your new baby, like it goes by so fast. It's so fast. And you have this sense that I had this sense before I became a parent that once your kids are like 8, you're just driving them to soccer practice and it's not that fun anymore, right? Or that once you have 2 kids in college, like, well, that must be sad. You must be sad and lonely. And that you only have 18 summers. You only have all this sort of scarcity that you're sold as soon as your baby's little, that you're going to miss the good part, which is ending any day now, unless you're happy every moment and every moment is wonderful. And my relationship with my kids, who are young adults now, is amazing. They're of course still the 3 most remarkable people I've ever met. I love them that way. And having that relationship with them, there's so many rewards with my 22-year-old now that I didn't have when he was the 2-month-old who screamed and would not sleep. And I spent so much of that first year feeling guilty that I wasn't enjoying it more, when it was actually really hard with that first child, because he was just he had reflux. He was a difficult baby. He's not a difficult adult. And I think I thought, oh no, this is the only good part when they're little, and I'm missing half of it with him crying and me being frustrated. And it's just not true, that there's so many rewards and there's time and nothing's running out, and you can relax into enjoying the parts that you can enjoy right now, knowing that there's so much more to come.
I like that. And actually, it's nice seeing that what is ahead is still exciting, because my son is heading into high school next year, which is bonkers for me. And I just the other day, I'm like, he's going to be out of the house in 4 years. That makes me sad. And I literally was like counting that down in my head. And I'm like, no. And that, like what you just said made me feel like, just because he hopefully will not be under my roof doesn't mean like I'm no longer going to be his parent. Like, I like that. Thank you for kind of giving that to me.
Yeah, right. Don't miss the next 4 years. Like, only 4 more years, only 3 more years, only 2 more. Yeah, it's but you were sold that, like, you're not making that up. You are sold that, on every commercial, but it doesn't mean it's true.
I like that. Where can people find your work?
So Happy to Help is available wherever books are sold. You can find all the different places on my website, which is amywilson.com. And I'm also the host of What Fresh Hell, as we were talking about. And you can find What Fresh Hell by just searching that where you're listening right now, or go to whatfreshhellpodcast.com.
And I'll make sure all that's in the show notes. Amy, it's amazing to connect with you again.
I can't believe it. Yeah. Yeah. You brought me so much prenatal yoga. I'm still friends with the woman that I did prenatal yoga with in your class. We're still friends all these years later. So
I love hearing that. I mean, like, truly, that's one of the most remarkable things is the friendships that can form and really support you through your life. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you for sharing your book and your time.
Thank you, Deb.
This has been an episode of Yoga, Birth, Babies, produced by Prenatal Yoga Center. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Periscope. I'm Deb Flaschenberg. Thanks for listening.
You've decided to give your baby breast milk. We want to help. We're the Boob Group, a group of moms and experts here to support you in your goals, whether you're breastfeeding, pumping, or something in between. Each week, a group of experienced moms openly discuss their success, their struggles, and society's impact on how they feed their babies. We provide an honest, natural, and judgment-free approach to breastfeeding, pumping, milk sharing, and more. Subscribe through your favorite podcast app or say, "Hey Alexa, play the Boob Group podcast." The Boob Group, where moms know breast.